Welcome back, Ashley. It is so lovely to have you here. You are a plethora of knowledge when it comes to the law and employment discrimination laws, but to have you here on a personal level and what really has informed you to pursue your passion for your career has been your own personal journey with lupus. And this is your story. I always want people to take ownership. Please share with us how you came to the diagnosis of lupus and what that struggle was like to actually get one.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate you talking about this because my journey to being diagnosed with lupus was the longest out of all of my chronic illnesses. I think when you live with one chronic illness and things might get better in some regards and not in others, you get kind of used to being in pain. And that's what I did for a really long time. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis and interstitial cystitis when I was around the age of 21, and I'm 34 now. And I really thought, this is it. We finally found the answer to all of my health problems, the abdominal pain, the back pain, having to use the restroom frequently, all of these things that affected my day-to-day life in pretty significant ways. And then as we were treating those with the different specialists, I noticed that I was still having these other symptoms. And for a while, I put off asking a doctor about it because frankly, I was like, these aren't my worst symptoms, so I'm not going to prioritize that right now. And it was really when I was in law school that I couldn't ignore my lupus symptoms anymore. I was having severe joint pain, really bad fatigue, nausea, a lot of things like swelling in my feet, rash on my face, hives on my body. And it was happening more and more frequently. And obviously law school is a stressful experience, though I loved it. But I've no doubt that when I would feel worse around finals time, that played into it. And at the time, I sought out a rheumatologist and they blew me off, to be honest with you. And it was really disappointing. And they said, listen, we think that it's probably what you already know you have. And your ANA blood test came back fine.
And what is that exactly, the ANA?
So the ANA test is where they're looking for autoimmune reactivity, basically. And I'm not a doctor, so to preface that, but it's my understanding that it helps identify when there's an autoimmune response in the body. And so it could be related to a few different conditions, RA, lupus, other forms of arthritis. And they said, it's fine, it's fine. And that was really what they kept focusing on, was that one blood test. And honestly, by the time I got in to see them, sometimes my symptoms wouldn't be there. And so to make an appointment, I was what I now know was in a lupus flare, but then you wait 3 months for an appointment and then you finally get in and the flares passed. And so the blood test was showing that I was fine. But it kept happening and it was incredibly frustrating to not have a doctor listen to my concerns from an objective perspective. And so I kind of gave up and I finished law school. I passed the bar exam. I started working as an attorney and I moved for work to a different part of the state. And so because of that, I needed a new primary care doctor. And that primary care doctor took one look at me, saw the rash on my face, saw that I was having difficulty walking with the joint pain. And he said, no, we got to figure this out. I think this is lupus. And he did a bunch of different blood tests. One of them that did come back was the double-stranded DNA test, which is known pretty definitively to diagnose lupus. And so that's when I finally got my diagnosis, started treatment, started seeing some differences, have had some ups and downs since then. But I would say that was really the very long journey to me getting diagnosed was, I started showing symptoms of my lupus, I would say 7 years before I was formally diagnosed.
7 years. 7 years of, and not only that, I mean, it could be destructive to
Yes.
so many organs, to your tissue, your joints. It's the more it goes untreated, the more trouble that it can continue causing. It's there's also a very high comorbidity I read, and again, prefacing this that we're both not physicians, but I did read that endometriosis and lupus do occur sometimes at the same time. So it's easy to say, oh, you have lupus, but you don't have endo, or you have endo, but you don't have lupus. But the symptoms are, like you said, they're different. They can present very differently.
Yeah.
And it's hard, as you said, I think for both of these illnesses, with any chronic illnesses that are invisible, even though you did present in flares with rashes and hives and swelling and difficulty walking, that it takes so much of a fight to get doctors to listen. And like you said, to have to wait 3 months when you're calling for an appointment, but you can't get one when you're in the flare. And then the doctor sees you and you're like, oh, you're perfectly fine. You're like, well, I wasn't fine 3 months ago.
Right.
What are some of the treatment options? And again, this is just your journey. This is not what anyone should do, especially without a diagnosis and without being under the care of a doctor. What can they do for lupus?
Well, I started off on Plaquenil. I would note that it's also called hydroxychloroquine, and started on that during the pandemic when there was some misinformation out there about that helping people with COVID or prevent COVID. That is scientifically not the case from my understanding. We know that now, but at the time it was a little bit frustrating because initially it was difficult for me to get the medication because of that. They were considering like setting aside doses in case it was needed during the pandemic. But that was my initial treatment. In addition to doing things like low impact exercising, a few different types of vitamins, trying to change my diet, which was already very restrictive because of my interstitial cystitis, to be even more anti-inflammatory focused. And I was on the Plaquenil for a while, and it really did help. I would say about almost a year ago, my symptoms started to worsen again. And I've been in a pretty constant lupus flare for about the past 6 months. It's been really challenging health-wise. Ironically, it's been at a time when my career is at an all-time high, which is great. And I'm so blessed to be able to do what I love and what I'm passionate about doing. But it requires a very intentional balance of taking care of my health any moment that I'm not working. So now my treatment consists of methotrexate once a week. That will affect me with side effects like nausea, fatigue. It basically makes me feel like I have the flu for the first 2 to 3 days after I take it. And so I take it on a Friday so that I can recover on the weekend and be able to work through the week. And then I'm on folic acid once a day to try to curb some of those side effects from the methotrexate. Other forms of treatment for lupus can sometimes include Benlysta, but there's definitely room for more treatments. I would love more options that don't have quite the side effects.
Are these oral tablets or some injections?
Some are injections. The Benlysta, from my understanding, is like an IV type of treatment. The methotrexate can be pill form or injection. I am currently on the pill form, but due to the side effects, there's a potential that I might have to switch to the injection. So we're kind of waiting to see. And that's the other challenging part about lupus treatments, is that when you feel sick, very often your doctors want to monitor the symptoms to see if a change needs to be made to your medication. And they don't change lightly, because there can be more significant side effects the more you move up the list. And at that same time, my health was worsening as they were like, let's monitor this, to the point where I haven't been able to eat solid food for months. And when I'm finally on a new medication, which I started about a month ago, they said it's going to take around 4 to 6 months to see if it will help or not. And then we have to do monthly blood tests and make sure that it's not affecting my liver in certain ways. So it's just a lot of balancing, a lot of communication with my doctors. And it's required a lot of time advocating for myself in a way that's brought up some medical PTSD from my past in getting diagnosed with endo, if I'm being honest.
I could see that. Yeah. And I do understand the apprehension. Like you said, it took 7 years and there was a part of you that didn't want to fight for yourself. And I've had this conversation with many with chronic illness at this point, and there are moments where I even know for myself, it's like, I'm tired. I would rather just go take my anti-nausea pill and my heat pad and go lay down and just let this cycle.
Yeah,
Have to go to a doctor who is going to fight me on how I feel and is going to tell me you've had X number of excision surgeries, or we didn't really see anything that significant, so you couldn't possibly be this sick, or any of those things that make you feel dismissed or that you're questioning your own sanity, even though you
right,
have gone through years and years and years of advocating and knowing every time you do advocate, you've been validated with a diagnosis.
right.
But it's exhausting. And here you are trying to, not even trying, you are. I mean, let's be clear, you are running a successful law practice. And like you said, you're at the peak of your career, you're in your prime years of earning too. And
Right,
here you are fighting against a medical system that is working for you and against you at the same time.
right.
And you're just trying to live. And when you said that you haven't been able to eat solid food in months, I almost felt like crying
Yeah,
because
it's it's truly been a nightmare. And I think that had I not been so open on my social media about my journey with my health, and that was done intentionally when I started my law practice. I had some lawyers discourage me from sharing about my own disabilities um, online because they thought it would deter clients from wanting to work with me. And I've not found that to be the case whatsoever. Like if anybody hears this and is concerned about that, for me, my clients have always treated me and have openly told me that me having a disability is seen as an asset to them because they know that I have empathy for a lot of what they go through, whether it's advocating with doctors, within the legal system, at work, in school. And so I know that to some people, it might be surprising that I've been in a flare up, a pretty bad one for the past few months. But luckily, I have a lot of support, not only from my friends and family, but my clients have even reached out to me, the ones who follow me on social media, and have been very supportive. But it's been difficult because, during the workday, we get so used to putting on, a happy face or an aggressive face and
Mhm.
going to court and having to stand in front of a judge and make a very strong argument and give it my all. And then afterwards, get back in the car, drive home, put on the sweatpants, write up my briefs or my other court filings from home. And there's a lot behind the scenes that I have to do just to be able to access the buildings I need to access with my disabilities, to make sure that my clients are all taken care of, but that I'm also managing my health in a way that makes me the best lawyer for my clients.
Mhm.
So it's a lot, and not being able to eat has been one of the most frustrating challenges. And it wasn't until I lost a significant amount of weight from it, and I wasn't, you know, uh, definitely was not overweight before all of this. And it took me becoming really malnourished for doctors to pay attention and to say, oh, wait, maybe she's right and there is something off here and we need to change this medication or try something new.
And that was from the nausea that was creating, yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, they're still figuring it out. They think it's a little bit related to the lupus. They are looking into things like gastroparesis. But I throughout this time, I would have a colonoscopy, and I literally had one day where I was in court and then drove home and started bowel prep. And a few hours later, I'm getting a colonoscopy. I've had times where I've actually, after my hysterectomy that I had, there was an emergency hearing and I had to Zoom into the hearing the day after my hysterectomy. And so it's frustrating because I love to do those things. I love my work. It energizes me. But it shouldn't be such a fight to make health outside of that. And you expect it from your body. It's always frustrating, and you don't always expect it from doctors and medical professionals who are there to help you. And I'm lucky now that I do have great doctors on my side. But even then, with new symptoms, there's a lot of hurry up and wait before we try something new. And that's difficult.
With lupus, I'm thinking back to Selena Gomez and how she documented that she needed a kidney.
Yeah.
Lupus is a very serious disease. Have you encountered, or have you been warned of any of those things that could potentially happen? Have you encountered any complications with organ issues?
My blood tests have shown at times some kidney issues. When we go for my rheumatology appointment, I do a blood test every time. And now with the treatments I'm on, I have to do monthly blood tests. And they look mainly at my liver and my kidneys. I also have a history of chronic kidney stones, so that is not fun. But yes, I've never had a doctor sit down and explain all of the ways in which lupus can affect the body, though. And I think that's something that could be improved. I kind of got the diagnosis, and then they said, okay, we're going to put you on medication. And then I had to figure out what all of it meant on my own. And so that's something that I would love to see improved in our medical system, is taking just even a few more minutes to explain on. I will say my primary care doctor is great about that, but specialists tend to kind of have to rush through appointments. And there are reasons for that, and I understand that, but it so badly affects our day-to-day life. To be honest, I think a lot of our friends and family, when we don't get the information, they don't get the information they need to be able to support us.
Mhm.
And so affect a lot. But yeah, certainly my kidneys, my liver, I've had some liver issues related to the lupus and other things. And also dealing with changes in mobility have been difficult. But it's something that I'm just going to always have to watch forever.
Yeah.
And it's
And
great. I thought, I saw Selena Gomez's latest documentary, and I thought she did such a wonderful job of like showing real ups and downs, and also how people who work with lupus have to navigate kind of the mind to be okay when you're not okay, or just
Mhm.
getting through the day, and the energy that takes. And I think anybody with any type of chronic illness can relate to that.
Yeah. It's like you already feel so vulnerable and exposed, and it's hard to with even your family and friends, because you have to explain to them that you're not feeling well, and they're like, again. You're like, well, it's chronic. I
Right.
am happen, the rest of my life. That is what chronic is. And and then on top of it with work, it's like you almost want to hide it. You want to make sure that no one thinks that you're unable to do what you need to do to make a living. And there's always this fear of like, I can't allow this disease to overshadow my work. And I have found within myself too that I've sometimes like I overextend because
Mhm.
there's a part of me that's so afraid of people thinking I wasn't able. So
Right.
if at my first endo surgery, 2016, I had a pretty major surgery and I was back to work like as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I could barely walk. And it was just ridiculous when I look back what I was trying to put myself through. I'm thinking of you doing a
Right.
Zoom post hysterectomy, just that emotion alone, forget the surgical healing, but the emotions that go along with that, mentally exhaustive. And then here you are putting on a different hat as an attorney.
Right.
It's not for the faint of heart, and it isn't, life is not fair and it isn't equitable. And that's where there are people like you who fight for people to receive justice, because many times you have employers and you have people who do not understand illness, and thank goodness it hasn't touched them, and I
Right.
hope it doesn't. But like you said, you're more informed with a kind of empathy that a lawyer or someone else would not be, because you yourself have walked in those shoes and are walking in them. And I'm grateful that people like you exist because you fight a good fight.
Yeah, it's so important. And if I have gone through what I have with my health over the past, 12, 13 years. Prior to that, I was a very healthy, and my illness hit me hard and fast. And so it was definitely a period of adjustment. And I'm lucky that I also, at that time, was getting a master's degree in counseling people with disabilities, including chronic illness. And so I was kind of learning these tools for other people that I could apply to my own life and now still apply to my legal clients. And it's frustrating for my clients to navigate these really complex legal systems in general. But then they also have to think about things like, is the courtroom accessible? Is there a restroom that they can use with their disabilities? Do we have a judge that really does not like Zoom hearings, but my client is severely immunocompromised and COVID numbers are back at us? There are so much that goes into the day-to-day analysis of living with any type of condition like ours. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of judges don't realize that. A lot of lawyers on the other side don't realize that until we appropriately bring it to their attention. And so one of the things that I'm doing now is I'm a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit because many of our courthouses are not accessible. They're not up to the ADA standards. For me to be able to do my job, I need those to be up to date. For my clients to be able to seek justice, I need those buildings up to date. And fighting those things is important. And we can't do that without balancing everything that we do behind the scenes too. And so I have so much respect for every single one of my clients because I know the battle that they're going through when they go home, and I know that they appreciate that I understand it too.
What what takeaway, what advice would one who was diagnosed with lupus and is maybe in the same position, whether they're in school, they're starting their career, they're at the height of their career, what advice do you have for them trying to navigate this?
For me, I would say there were two initial steps that made all the difference when I was diagnosed with endometriosis and when I was diagnosed with lupus. Find your community. For me, women that I met on social media truly 100% saved my life by telling me what to look for in a doctor, what not to look for, what questions to ask at appointments, what surgeries to know about, what treatments that they were on and the side effects they were having. And also just to vent, because living with lupus or endo or any disability is going to have very frustrating moments. Then when you connect with those individuals, you also see that there are moments of great joy, and life is still incredibly meaningful when you live with a disability like we do. And so I would say finding that community is one of the first. Literally the way that I did it was to search using a hashtag on social media.
I did the same. I
Literally,
did the same.
or searching lupus. And for me, my lupus diagnosis really came out of left field in one way, because I'd given up on trying to figure out what the problem was. And I thought, all right, I'll just every few months I'll feel really, really sick and we won't know why. And that's that. And so when my primary care doctor was like, I ran these blood tests just to see, and you definitely have lupus. It took me back. And so finding that community again online really helped a moment. But in addition to finding that community, definitely reach out to people who provide services to the disability community. It's so important to know that your journey and your job, or you going to school, does not have to look like anyone else's journey. There's no rule that says there's one best way to do things, no matter what anybody else tells you. If you can make the same end result using reasonable accommodations to which you're entitled under the law, in school, in work, in the community, then your journey there does not need to look like your classmate's journey. There's no set timeline. There's no one method. And I come up against that a lot, as do my clients, where they'll say at their job, oh, well, we just don't do it that way here. Or we want to go back to doing things the way that we did before the pandemic. And when we ask why, they can very rarely give a legitimate answer. And so it often takes the support of a professional to kind of enforce those rights. But the first step is knowing that you have the rights. So when you're searching online or on social media, or you're talking to your doctors, or you're talking to a vocational counselor, make sure that you're being honest and raising all of these things that you want to do professionally or academically, and some of the ways your symptoms affect all of that, so that they can help you come up with a game plan. Because for me, my law school experience looked like a lot of my peers, but I loved law school and I was successful there. And on times I had to use a cane, I had to use a laptop because my hand tremors were really bad, to type up tests, access to a restroom, to adjust my medical device and to use the restroom. And, there are things that are frustrating living with a chronic illness, but sometimes your dreams are still very doable, or you can adapt them so that you still have a purpose and a passion that can be fulfilled, if you're feeling up to it. And it's also the last thing I'll say, social media, getting good support, knowing your rights. But the third big key is knowing that you don't need to prove anything to anybody. Like, if you want to rest, lazy. It's okay to rest. You're dealing with a lot. You're allowed to grieve new changes, old changes, whenever you need to grieve them. Your feelings are valid. And I always reinforce that with myself and with my clients.
That was beautifully said. Very down to earth, logical, wise advice, but something that people need to hear, because we have this idea in society that everything's on this construct, this time and that we have to do it. It's a race, it's a race, it's a race. It's like you don't have anything to prove to anybody except yourself. And like you said, you can adapt the dream. And I love that, because so many people defer dreams based on what they think are roadblocks. And disabilities can be roadblocks, but if you approach it differently, there's a way to circumvent them. And I think it's just really, really helpful, all the work that you're doing and all the advice that you just bestowed for the people watching today. So Ashley, it's always wonderful to have you. They're so informative, and my thoughts, as I always do, when it
Yeah.
comes to you feeling the best that you can.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that you all are doing to continue to raise awareness and to support people in the chronic illness community. It's so important. I've definitely benefited from it personally. So keep doing what you're doing too.
Thank you. Will do. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.